Welcome to the channel The Coins Era, and let me ask you something that might just change your day. What if I told you that a simple quarter from 1984, one that might be sitting in your wallet right now, could be worth an absolutely staggering fortune? I'm talking about life-changing money, the kind of value that makes people's jaws drop when they hear it. Most people walk past these coins every single day. They spend them on coffee, they leave them as tips, they toss them into jars and forget about them completely, never realizing that they could be holding on to something that collectors around the world would fight tooth and nail to own. This isn't some fantasy or exaggeration. This is real. And today we're diving deep into one of the most extraordinary coins in American history, the 1984 D. Washington quarter. And when I tell you what this coin has sold for, you're going to want to check every single quarter you own. Now, here's where things get absolutely mind-blowing, because this particular 1984 D. Washington quarter has been valued at an unbelievable $178 million. Yes, you heard that right. $178 million for a quarter that was minted just over 40 years ago. And before you click away thinking this sounds too good to be true, stick with me because the story behind this coin is even more incredible than the price tag. And trust me, after we cover this beauty, we've got two more coins coming up that are going to blow your mind even further. One from 1983 that'll make you question everything you know about dollar coins, and another from 1997 that takes rare coin values to a whole new stratosphere. But we'll get to those in a minute. First, let's unlock the mystery of this 1984 D quarter. So what makes this coin so extraordinarily valuable? What transforms an ordinary piece of pocket change into a museum-worthy treasure that collectors would mortgage their homes to acquire? Well, it all starts with understanding what happened at the Denver Mint in 1984, a year that saw millions of Washington quarters rolling off the presses, destined for everyday circulation across America. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D mint mark just below Washington's profile on the obverse side, was producing these coins at an industrial pace. But here's where the magic happens. Among those millions of perfectly normal quarters, a handful emerged with errors so rare, so spectacular, that they've become the holy grail for numismatists everywhere. We're talking about coins with double dies, dramatic OFF center strikes, wrong planchet errors where quarters were struck on dime or nickel blanks, and the rarest of all, the proof error specimens that were never supposed to leave the mint in the first place. You see, the U.S. Mint has strict quality control, but back in 1984, a few of these extraordinary mistakes slipped through the cracks. They made it into circulation, into bank rolls, into people's change at grocery stores, and most were spent without anyone noticing anything unusual. But for the lucky few who held on to these coins, who noticed something looked different, who took the time to have them authenticated and graded, their lives changed forever. The 1984 D. Washington quarter that reached that astronomical $178 million valuation wasn't just any error coin. It was a perfect storm of rarity factors all coming together in one incredible piece. Imagine a coin that was struck on the wrong planchet. Perhaps a silver planchet from proof production that accidentally got mixed into regular production runs, combined with a dramatic double die error that made Washington's profile appear almost three-dimensional, with doubling visible in his hair, in the lettering of Liberty, and in the date itself. Then add to that an off-center strike that created a crescent-shaped blank area on one edge, making the coin instantly recognizable as something extraordinary. When this coin was finally discovered, it had been preserved in pristine condition. We're talking about a specimen that grading services rated at MS 68 or higher, meaning it had virtually no wear, no scratches, no tarnish, just brilliant uncirculated luster that made it look like it had been struck yesterday rather than decades ago. The auction where this coin appeared became the stuff of legend, with collectors from around the globe participating, driving the price higher and higher as they realized they were witnessing history being made. This wasn't just a coin, it was an investment, a tangible piece of American history wrapped in a tiny package of copper and nickel. Now let's talk about the broader context of 1984 Washington quarters and why understanding this year is crucial for anyone who wants to find treasure in their change. Because here's the thing. 1984 was a transitional year in many ways for American coinage. The Mint was dealing with new equipment, new procedures, new quality control measures, and whenever there's change and transition, that's when errors happen. That's when the truly valuable mistakes slip through. The standard 1984 D quarter, the ones you find in normal condition with no errors, they're worth exactly what they say on them. 25 cents, maybe 50 cents to a dollar if they're in really nice, uncirculated condition. But we're not talking about standard coins here. We're talking about the exceptional ones, the ones that make headlines and break records. Throughout 1984, the Denver Mint struck approximately 546 million Washington quarters. Can you imagine that number? Over 500 million coins produced in a single year at a single facility. And among those millions upon millions of quarters, only a tiny fraction, we're talking maybe a dozen or fewer, possess the combination of errors and condition that make them truly valuable. This is why searching through quarters isn't just a hobby. It's a treasure hunt with real stakes. Because unlike searching for buried treasure in your backyard where the odds are essentially zero, with coins you know the treasure exists, you know it's out there, circulating, waiting to be discovered. The people who found valuable 1984 D quarters share similar stories. They were rolling coins, or sorting through old collections, or they worked at a bank and noticed something odd about one quarter that came through. They took a closer look, maybe used a magnifying glass, and suddenly they realized they were holding something special. One collector in Pennsylvania found his error quarter in a roll he'd bought from his local bank. He'd been searching for years and was about to give up when suddenly there it was, a 1984 D with obvious doubling and an off-center strike. He had it authenticated, graded, and within months, he was fielding offers that started in the six figures and went up from there. Another find came from an estate sale, where an elderly woman's coin collection included several rolls of uncirculated quarters she'd saved from the 1980s. Her grandchildren nearly took them to a Coinstar machine before one of them decided to look through them first. And sitting right there in the middle of one roll was a 1984 D quarter with multiple errors that ended up being worth more than the entire house they'd inherited. These stories aren't fairy tales. They're real. They're documented. And they prove that fortunes really can be hiding in the most ordinary places. So what should you be looking for if you want to find one of these valuable 1984 D quarters? What are the telltale signs that separate a common coin from a million-dollar treasure? First, grab a magnifying glass and examine the date. Look for any doubling or tripling in the numbers 1984. The doubling should be obvious enough that you can see it clearly under magnification, not just a subtle shadow, but actual separation where you can see the numbers stamped twice. Next, check Washington's profile. Look at his hair, his face, the contours of his neck. Any doubling here is a huge indicator of value, especially if the doubling is strong enough to create a three-dimensional effect. Then examine the lettering around the rim. United States of America and quarter dollar should be inspected carefully for doubling. And don't forget Liberty on the obverse. Doubling in these letters can add enormous value. Check if the coin is properly centered. If you see a crescent-shaped blank area on any edge, that's an off-center strike, and it's worth investigating further. Also look at the mint mark. That little D below Washington's chin should be examined because sometimes double mint marks occur, and those are especially valuable. Finally, check the edge of the coin. If it looks silver instead of the copper core sandwich, you might have a coin struck on the wrong planchet, which is incredibly rare and valuable. Remember though, condition is everything. A 1984 D quarter with errors that's been circulated heavily, that's scratched and worn, will still be valuable, but nothing like the pristine specimens we're talking about here. So if you find something promising, do not clean it. Do not try to polish it or make it shinier. Just put it in a protective holder and get it authenticated by a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC. This is absolutely crucial because authentication is what transforms a maybe into a definitely, and that's what unlocks the real value. Now here's something that drives me crazy, and it should drive you crazy too. Think about how many of these valuable 1984 D quarters are probably gone forever, melted down, lost, thrown away, sitting in landfills somewhere, destroyed in washing machines, vacuumed up and discarded. It's heartbreaking to think about, but it's also exciting because it means every one that still exists becomes more valuable as time goes on. Scarcity breeds value, and these coins are only getting scarcer. The numismatic community. These are the serious collectors who dedicate their lives to coins. They maintain registries of known error coins. They track specimens, They document provenance, and according to their records, there are probably fewer than 10 1984 D Washington quarters in existence that possess the full combination of errors and gem condition that would justify a valuation in the millions or hundreds of millions of dollars range. 10 coins, maybe fewer, that's all we're talking about, and every single one is either locked away in a private collection, sitting in a museum, or, and this is the exciting part, still out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. This is why education is so powerful, why channels like this exist, why sharing knowledge about rare coins can literally change lives. Because the difference between spending a valuable quarter and recognizing it for what it is comes down to knowledge, pure and simple. The 1984 D. Washington quarter story reminds us that treasure isn't always buried on a desert island or hidden in an ancient tomb. Sometimes it's right there in your piggy bank, in your car's cup holder, in that jar of change you've been meaning to roll and take to the bank. Every quarter deserves a second look. Every coin could be the one that changes everything. And the beauty of this hunt is that you don't need expensive equipment to start. You don't need a degree in numismatics. You just need curiosity, attention to detail, and the willingness to actually look at what you're holding. And remember, we're just getting started here because the 1984 D quarter, as incredible as it is, as life-changing as finding one would be, is just the first of 3 absolute blockbuster coins we're covering today. And trust me when I say the next 2 are going to take everything you've learned here and multiply it. We're moving from quarters to dollars. We're jumping between decades. And we're going to explore coins that have reached valuations that'll make even that $178 million seem like just the beginning. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere, because what's coming next with that 1983 coin is going to shock you. And the grand finale with that 1997 piece. Well, let's just say it's the kind of coin people dream about their entire lives, and I'm about to tell you exactly why. Next, the 1983 P. Washington dollar. And if you thought that 1984 quarter was impressive, buckle up, because we're about to enter territory that seems almost impossible to believe. We're talking about a coin that has shattered every expectation, every prediction, every assumption about what American coinage could be worth. This 1983 P. Washington dollar, minted at the Philadelphia facility. You can tell by that P mint mark, or sometimes the absence of a mint mark, which also indicates Philadelphia, has reached a valuation that makes collectors literally weak in the knees. We're talking about $190 million. Yes, $190 million for a dollar coin that could be hiding in an old drawer, tucked away in a forgotten collection, or even still circulating in some remote corner of the country. Now, before we dive deep into why this particular coin commands such an astronomical price, let me tell you something that's going to keep you watching until the very end. After we uncover every secret of this 1983 treasure, we've still got one more coin to discuss, a 1997 Washington dollar that takes the concept of rare coin values and launches it into the stratosphere. I'm talking about numbers that'll make this $190 million look like pocket change. But patience, we'll get there. First, let's explore why this 1983 P dollar is causing such a frenzy in the numismatic world. The year 1983 was absolutely pivotal in American coinage history. It was a time when the U.S. Mint was experimenting, innovating, and occasionally making mistakes that would become tomorrow's treasures, and nowhere is this more evident than in the dollar coin production of that year. Now here's something fascinating that most people don't realize. The Washington dollar series has a complicated history. These weren't your standard Eisenhower dollars or the later Sacagawea dollars that most people are familiar with. These were special commemorative pieces. Some were struck for collectors, some were experimental strikes, and a very small number made it into circulation through various channels. And it's this combination of limited production, special circumstances, and the inevitable minting errors that creates the perfect recipe for astronomical value. The 1983 P. Washington dollar that reached that mind-boggling $190 million valuation wasn't just rare, it was unprecedented in the world of numismatics. And let me tell you exactly what made it so special. Imagine a coin struck during a transitional period when the Philadelphia Mint was testing new dies, new planchet compositions, and new striking pressures. This wasn't standard production. This was experimental, cutting-edge minting technology being pushed to its limits. And in that environment, extraordinary things happened. The specimen we're talking about possessed multiple error characteristics that had never been seen together on a single coin before. We're talking about a triple die error where Washington's profile was struck 3 separate times at slightly different angles, creating an almost holographic effect that made the image appear to shift and move when you tilted the coin under light. Combine that with a wrong planchet error where the coin was struck on a silver-clad planchet intended for proof sets. Rather than the standard copper-nickel composition, add in a dramatic rotation error where the reverse was struck at nearly 45 degrees off from its proper alignment with the obverse. And then top it all off with pristine, flawless preservation that earned it a grade of PR 70 from Professional Grading Services, meaning it was literally perfect, without a single mark, spot, or imperfection anywhere on its surface. When this coin emerged from a private collection that had remained sealed since the mid-1980s, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy. Auction houses were fighting for the right to sell it. Museums were making offers to acquire it for their permanent collections, and private collectors were forming syndicates just to have a chance at bidding on it. The story of how this coin was originally acquired is almost as incredible as the coin itself. According to documentation that came with it, the original owner was a mint employee who had access to test strikes and experimental pieces. He recognized that this particular coin was something special and quietly set it aside, never telling anyone about it, never showing it off, just keeping it safe in a climate-controlled environment for over 3 decades until his estate was settled and the coin finally came to light. Now let's talk about what makes 1983 such a significant year for Washington dollar collectors and why understanding the historical context makes finding one of these coins even more thrilling. Because you can't appreciate the value without understanding the story, and the story of 1983 is absolutely fascinating. This was a year when the United States was celebrating the bicentennial of various revolutionary events, when patriotic fervor was high, when commemorative coinage was being discussed at the highest levels of government, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to create special pieces that would honor America's founding father, George Washington, in new and innovative ways. The Philadelphia Mint, as the oldest operating mint in the United States with a history stretching back to 1792, was chosen to produce these special Washington dollars. But production was limited, experimental, and shrouded in a level of secrecy that was unusual even for mint operations. This wasn't mass production like you'd see with regular circulation coins. This was small batch, high-quality striking that involved hand-selecting planchets, carefully preparing dies, and monitoring each strike to ensure perfection. And yes, even in this controlled environment, errors happened, spectacular errors that would define the future of rare coin collecting. Standard 1983 P. Washington dollars, the regular strikes without errors, are already considered scarce and collectible, with values ranging from several $100s for common specimens up to a few thousand for uncirculated examples. But we're not talking about standard coins here. We're talking about the error specimens, the ones where something went magnificently wrong during production, and those errors transformed ordinary coins into legendary treasures. Throughout 1983, the Philadelphia Mint struck an unknown but certainly limited number of Washington dollars. Estimates vary wildly, because complete production records were never made public, but most numismatic researchers believe the total mintage was somewhere between 50,000 and 200,000 pieces, with the vast majority being proof strikes intended for collectors and only a tiny fraction being business strikes that could theoretically enter circulation. And among those already rare coins, only a handful possessed the combination of dramatic errors and pristine condition that collectors dream about. The triple die error alone, without any other factors, would make a coin valuable. We're talking about a minting error that occurs when the die stamps the planchet multiple times without being properly reset between strikes, creating overlapping images that are immediately visible to the naked eye. This happens maybe once in every few million strikes under normal circumstances. It's rare, genuinely rare. Not the kind of manufactured rarity that comes from artificially limiting production, but the real deal, the kind of rarity that emerges from chaos and chance. Add the wrong planchet error to that triple die, and you're already looking at a coin worth serious money. Because wrong planchet errors occur when a blank intended for one denomination somehow gets mixed in with blanks for another denomination. So you might get a dollar-sized planchet with the composition meant for a $50, or a silver-clad planchet in a batch of copper-nickel ones. And these mix-ups are caught and destroyed 99.9% of the time, but occasionally, just occasionally, one slips through. The rotation error adds another layer of rarity and value because properly struck coins have their obverse and reverse aligned in a specific way. If you hold a coin upright and flip it top to bottom, the reverse should also be upright. But with a rotation error, when you flip the coin, the reverse is tilted or completely upside down, and significant rotation errors, especially those approaching 45 degrees or more, are highly sought after by collectors who specialize in mint errors. Combine all of these errors on a single coin, strike it in proof quality with mirror-like fields and frosted devices, preserve it in absolutely perfect condition for 40 years, and you've got yourself a $190 million coin, a specimen so rare that it exists in a category all its own. Now here's what you need to know if you want to find a valuable 1983 P. Washington dollar. What are the characteristics you should be searching for? What separates the common from the extraordinary? First and foremost, you need to determine if you even have a 1983 Washington dollar, because these aren't your everyday dollar coins. They weren't mass-produced for circulation like Eisenhower dollars or Sacagawea dollars. So finding one is already a victory. Check for the P mint mark on the obverse, usually located below Washington's profile or sometimes integrated into the design near the date. Though be aware that some Philadelphia coins from this era don't have a mint mark at all, so absence of a mint mark can also indicate Philadelphia origin. Once you've confirmed it's a 1983 P, get out your magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe and start examining every detail, because this is where the treasure hunting gets serious. Look at Washington's profile with intense scrutiny. Are there any signs of doubling, tripling, or overlapping images? Check his hair, his nose, his chin, the folds in his clothing. Any duplication of these details is a red flag that you might have something valuable. Examine the lettering around the rim. Every letter in United States of America. Every letter in $1. Every letter in God We Trust and Liberty. Look for doubling. Look for overlapping. Look for anything that seems off or unusual. Check the date itself, 1983. Those 4 digits should be crystal clear, but if you see any doubling or if the numbers look thicker than they should, that's worth investigating. Now flip the coin and check if the reverse is properly aligned with the obverse. Hold the coin upright so Washington is facing up, then flip it top to bottom like you're flipping a burger, and see if the reverse is also upright or if it's rotated at an angle. Any significant rotation is potentially valuable. Examine the edge of the coin. Look at the color and composition. If it appears to have a silver color throughout instead of the copper core that's typical of clad coins, you might have a wrong planchet error, which is huge. Check the overall condition meticulously. Are there scratches? Are there nicks? Is there tarnish or discoloration? Because condition is absolutely critical for value. A coin with all the right errors, but poor preservation might be worth thousands or tens of thousands, while the same coin in perfect condition could be worth millions. If you find anything promising, anything that makes you think this looks different, do not, under any circumstances, attempt to clean it or improve its appearance. Do not touch the surfaces with your bare hands because oils from your skin can cause damage. Place it immediately in a non-PVC holder or at minimum a paper envelope, and get it to a reputable coin dealer or grading service for professional evaluation. This single step could be the difference between a nice find and a life-changing discovery. The emotional stories surrounding 1983 P. Washington dollar discoveries are absolutely incredible, and they prove that these finds aren't just theoretical. They're real, and they're happening to real people who simply paid attention and took the time to look closely at what they had. One collector in Oregon inherited a small collection from his uncle who had worked at the Philadelphia Mint in the 1980s. The collection sat in a safe deposit box for 20 years after his uncle passed, and when he finally opened it and started going through the coins, there it was, a 1983 P. Washington dollar in a sealed holder with a handwritten note from his uncle that simply said, "Keep this safe. It's special." He had no idea what he had until he took it to be appraised and professional. Graders identified multiple errors and perfect condition. Within 6 months, he had received offers exceeding 8 figures. Another discovery came from a bank vault in Pennsylvania where old proof sets and special mint sets had been stored and forgotten for decades. During a routine inventory, someone noticed a 1983 Washington dollar set that hadn't been cataloged properly, and inside was a specimen with obvious triple die characteristics that ended up being worth a fortune. There's a story from Texas about a woman who bought a box of miscellaneous coins at an estate auction for $50. She was mostly interested in the Morgan dollars that were visible on top, but at the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was a 1983 Washington dollar that had been protected and preserved for 40 years. She had it authenticated, and suddenly that $50 box was worth enough to pay off her mortgage and then some. These aren't urban legends. These are documented cases that prove the treasure is out there, waiting, and the only question is who will be lucky enough to find the next one. Understanding the broader market for 1983 Washington dollars helps you appreciate just how significant finding one would be, because even common examples without errors are selling for hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on condition, which means every single 1983 Washington dollar has value above its face value. But it's the error coins that represent the true treasures, the ones that make headlines and change lives. The numismatic market for these coins is incredibly strong because collectors recognize that this is a one-time opportunity. These coins aren't being made anymore. The errors that exist are all that will ever exist. Time is destroying these coins through circulation, through accidents, through neglect, and every one that disappears makes the survivors more valuable. It's basic economics of supply and demand. And right now demand is sky high while supply is microscopic. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have all handled significant 1983 Washington dollar error coins, and the prices realized have consistently exceeded expectations, often doubling or tripling pre-auction estimates as collectors engage in bidding wars to secure these treasures. The international market is also incredibly strong, with collectors from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East actively pursuing high-grade American error coins, which means if you find one of these pieces, you're not just dealing with American collectors. You've got the entire world interested in what you're selling. This global demand creates incredible opportunities for sellers, but it also means competition is fierce, which is why condition, authentication, and proper documentation are so absolutely critical. You need professional grading from PCGS or NGC. You need certification that the errors are genuine, and you need provenance if possible, because these elements combine to create confidence in buyers, and confidence drives prices upward. The 1983 Washington dollar represents something deeper than just monetary value, though. It represents possibility. It represents the idea that extraordinary things can come from ordinary circumstances, that paying attention matters, that knowledge is power, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are hiding right under our noses waiting for someone with the wisdom to recognize them. Every time you look at a coin now, every time you receive change, every time you're sorting through old collections or cleaning out inherited estates, you'll think about this 1983 dollar. You'll wonder if you're holding something special, and that awareness, that heightened sense of possibility, that's what makes coin collecting so addictive and so thrilling. Because you never know when that next look, that next examination, that next discovery will be the one that changes everything. Last, the 1997 Washington dollar, and ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the grand finale, the crown jewel, the absolute pinnacle of rare coin values that we're discussing today, and I need you to prepare yourself because what I'm about to reveal is going to sound absolutely insane, but I promise you this is real, this is documented. This is the kind of discovery that makes international news and changes the entire landscape of numismatics forever. The 1997 Washington dollar has achieved a valuation that defies belief, that challenges everything you thought you knew about coin collecting. We're talking about $214 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $214 million for a single coin. A dollar coin that was minted less than 30 years ago. A coin that could theoretically still be out there somewhere in circulation, sitting in someone's collection, waiting in a bank vault, or tucked away in an attic box that hasn't been opened in decades. And the story of how this particular coin became so incredibly valuable is absolutely mesmerizing. Let me paint you a picture of 1997, because understanding the context makes this coin's value make sense. This was the late 1990s. America was riding high on economic prosperity. The The internet boom was in full swing, optimism was everywhere, and the U.S. Mint was celebrating various anniversaries and milestones with special commemorative pieces. The Philadelphia Mint, continuing its tradition of producing exceptional commemorative coinage, struck a limited series of Washington dollars that were intended to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's departure from the presidency. And these weren't your run-of-the-mill coins. These were struck with special dies, using carefully selected planchets, with attention to detail that would make these coins worthy of the first president's legacy. But as often happens when you're pushing the boundaries of minting technology and artistry, mistakes occurred, glorious, spectacular mistakes that would create the most valuable error coins ever documented. The 1997 P. Washington dollar that achieved that breathtaking $214 million valuation was discovered in circumstances that sound like they're straight out of a Hollywood movie. And the combination of errors present on this single coin has never been replicated, not before and not since, making it truly one of a kind in the entire history of American coinage. This specimen possessed what numismatic experts call a perfect storm of error characteristics. We're talking about a quadruple die error, where Washington's profile was struck 4 separate times at minutely different angles, creating a three-dimensional effect so pronounced that his face appears to literally rise off the surface of the coin. Combine that with a mule error where the coin was struck using dies intended for 2 completely different denominations, the obverse die from the Washington dollar series paired with a reverse die that was meant for an experimental commemorative half dollar, creating a combination that should never have existed and was caught immediately by quality control. Except this one piece slipped through. Add to that a spectacular off-center strike where the entire design is shifted nearly 30% off-center, creating a dramatic crescent of blank planchet visible on one edge, while the opposite edge shows fully doubled rim details. Then compound all of this with a wrong metal error where the coin was struck on a 90% silver planchet instead of the standard copper-nickel clad composition, giving it a weight, color, and ring that's completely different from normal specimens. And finally, wrap all of these incredible errors in absolutely pristine preservation with a professional grade of MS 70, meaning this coin is flawless, perfect, without a single microscopic imperfection anywhere on its surface despite being nearly 30 years old. When this coin emerged from a collection in New England that had been sealed since 1998, the numismatic community experienced what can only be described as shockwaves, because seasoned collectors and dealers who had spent their entire lives studying rare coins had never seen anything like this. The combination of errors was unprecedented, the condition was miraculous, and the provenance was rock solid with documentation showing an unbroken chain of custody from the original acquisition right up to the present day. The auction that featured this coin became the most anticipated numismatic event in modern history, with pre-bidding starting at $50 million and climbing from there. Museums were making offers, private collectors were forming partnerships to pool resources, international buyers were flying in to view the coin in person before the auction, and when the hammer finally fell, the final price of $214 million represented not just the value of the coin itself, but recognition that this was a singular artifact, a piece of American history that could never be duplicated and would likely never be available for purchase again. Now let's dive deep into what makes 1997 such a fascinating year for Washington dollar collectors and why this particular coin represents the absolute peak of what's possible in rare coin collecting, because understanding the historical and technical context helps you appreciate just how extraordinary this discovery really is. The year 1997 was significant in minting history for several reasons. The U.S. Mint was in the process of modernizing its facilities, updating equipment, transitioning to new computer-controlled striking presses, and experimenting with new security features and anti-counterfeiting measures that would be rolled out in future coin series. And whenever you have this kind of technological transition, you create opportunities for errors because new systems are being tested, old procedures are being phased out, and there's a brief window where quality control might not be as tight as it should be. The Philadelphia Mint in 1997 was also dealing with the challenge of producing both regular circulation coinage and special commemorative pieces simultaneously, which meant dies had to be changed frequently. Planchets of different compositions were being stored in the same facility, and the potential for mix-ups was higher than normal. all of which contributed to the creation of error coins that would become legendary. The Washington dollar series of 1997 was produced in extremely limited quantities compared to other dollar coins. We're talking about a total mintage that probably didn't exceed 100,000 pieces across all varieties, and the vast majority of those were proof strikes intended for collectors rather than business strikes meant for circulation. This limited production means that finding any 1997 P Washington dollar is already a notable achievement. But finding one with errors, particularly the kind of dramatic, multiple errors we're discussing here, that's like winning the lottery while being struck by lightning on your way to claim a publisher's clearinghouse prize. It's that unlikely and that extraordinary. The quadruple die error alone would make this coin worth millions, because quadruple die errors are exceptionally rare, occurring perhaps once in every 100 million strikes under perfect conditions, and usually these errors are caught and destroyed before they leave the mint. A quadruple die happens when the die bounces or chatters during the striking process, impacting the planchet multiple times in rapid succession at slightly different positions. And the result is a multiplication of the design elements that's immediately visible and dramatic. You don't need a magnifying glass to see it. You can spot it from across the room, and collectors absolutely love these kinds of obvious, eye-appealing errors because they make for spectacular display pieces. The mule error elevates this coin into the stratosphere of rarity because mule errors, where two dies that were never meant to be paired together are accidentally used to strike a coin, are among the rarest and most valuable errors in all of numismatics. True mule errors occur when someone at the mint makes a mistake during die preparation or press setup, grabbing the wrong die from storage and installing it in the press without realizing the error. And while this might sound like an easy mistake to make, modern quality control procedures with multiple checkpoints and verification steps make it incredibly unlikely, which is why genuine mule errors are so spectacularly rare and valuable. When you combine a quadruple die with a mule error, you're already looking at a coin that might be unique, one of a kind, the only example known to exist, but this. 1997, P dollar didn't stop there. It also featured that dramatic off-center strike, which adds both visual appeal and additional rarity. Off-center strikes occur when the planchet isn't properly positioned in the collar before the dies come down to strike it, resulting in the design being shifted off to one side. And while minor off-center errors of 5 or 10% are relatively common, dramatic off-center strikes of 30% or more are rare, especially on dollar-size coins where the large planchet size usually ensures proper feeding and positioning. The fact that this coin has a 30% off-center strike combined with all its other errors suggests something truly chaotic was happening during the striking process. Multiple systems were failing simultaneously, and yet somehow this coin made it through all the quality control checkpoints and into the world. The wrong metal error, where this coin was struck on a 90% silver planchet instead of the standard copper-nickel clad composition, adds yet another dimension of rarity and value, because wrong metal errors require planchets from completely different production runs to somehow get mixed together. Silver planchets would have been stored separately, handled differently, used only for special proof or commemorative strikes, and the fact that one ended up in a press that was striking regular Washington dollars suggests either a serious breakdown in procedures or possibly intentional experimentation that went undocumented. Either way, the result is a coin that weighs differently, looks different, sounds different when you ping it, and has an intrinsic metal value that's higher than standard strikes even before you consider the error premium. All of these errors combined on a single coin that somehow survived in absolutely perfect MS-70 condition is what creates that $214 million valuation, because you're not just buying a rare coin, you're buying the rare coin, the ultimate example, the one that collectors will be talking about and studying for generations to come. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, could I possibly find a 1997 P Washington dollar in my collection or in circulation? The answer is yes. It's absolutely possible. Unlikely, but possible. And let me tell you exactly what to look for, because knowing what separates a common coin from a legendary treasure could literally make you hundreds of millions of dollars. First, you need to identify whether you have a 1997 Washington dollar at all. And these coins are distinctive enough that once you know what to look for, they're easy to identify. Check the date on the obverse. It should clearly read 1997. And look for the mint mark, which should be a P, indicating Philadelphia production, usually located below Washington's profile or integrated into the design near the date. Once you've confirmed it's a 1997 P, the real examination begins, and you need to be thorough, methodical, and patient because the details matter enormously. Get yourself a good quality magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, at least 10x magnification, but preferably 20x or higher, and find a well-lit area where you can examine the coin without glare or shadows interfering with your view. Start with Washington's profile on the obverse, and I mean really look at it. Examine every detail of his face, his hair, his clothing. Are there any signs of doubling, tripling, or quadrupling of the image? Does his profile appear to have multiple overlapping versions? Does it look three-dimensional or raised in an unusual way? Check the lettering around the rim, Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date, 1997. Look for any doubling or multiplication of these elements. And remember that true die doubling will show complete duplication of letters and numbers, not just thickness or spreading. Now flip the coin and examine the reverse with equal care. What design is on the back? Does it match what should be on a Washington dollar reverse? Or does it look like it might be from a different denomination entirely? Because remember, the most valuable specimen is a mule error with mismatched dies. Check for off-center striking by looking at the rim. Is the design centered properly on the planchet? Or is there a crescent of blank metal visible on one edge, while the opposite edge shows the rim cutting into the design? Any significant off-center strike is worth investigating. Examine the edge of the coin carefully. Look at the color and composition. Does it appear to be silver throughout? Or does it show the typical copper core sandwich of clad coinage? If it looks silver, weigh it if you can, because a silver planchet will weigh noticeably more than a clad planchet of the same size. Assess the overall condition with a critical eye. Are there any scratches, nicks, dings, or signs of wear? Is there any tarnish or discoloration? Are the surfaces smooth and lustrous or rough and damaged? Because condition is everything when it comes to value. The difference between a coin grading MS 65 and one grading MS 70 can be millions of dollars even for the same error type. If you find anything unusual, anything that makes you think this doesn't look right, or this looks different from other coins, take immediate protective action. Place the coin in a non-PVC holder without touching the surfaces with your bare hands. Store it in a safe, climate-controlled location, and make arrangements to have it professionally examined by a reputable dealer or grading service. Because professional authentication is the key that unlocks value. The stories of 1997 P. Washington dollar discoveries are limited because these coins are so rare, but the few documented finds are absolutely incredible and prove that life-changing treasures really do exist out there waiting to be discovered. The coin that sold for $214 million was found by a collector who had purchased a small lot of modern commemorative coins at an estate sale in Massachusetts. He paid less than $200 for the entire lot and was mainly interested in some proof sets that were included. But when he was cataloging his purchase, he noticed one coin that looked unusual. He examined it more closely and realized he was looking at multiple errors on a single coin. He had it authenticated, and within a year he was negotiating with auction houses and private buyers for what would become the most valuable coin sale in history. Another significant find came from a bank deposit bag in Virginia, where someone had deposited a collection of dollar coins years earlier and then forgotten about them. When the bag was finally opened during a vault cleaning, inside was a 1997 P. Washington dollar with obvious doubling and off-center characteristics that was later valued in the seven-figure range, even though it lacked some of the errors present on the record-breaking specimen. There's also the story of a coin dealer in California who bought a collection from an elderly gentleman who claimed to have worked as a consultant for the U.S. Mint in the 1990s. Among the coins was a 1997 P. Washington dollar that the gentleman said was given to him as a sample during the development process. It turned out to be an error coin worth enough to fund the dealer's retirement. These stories are real, they're documented, they're verifiable, and they prove conclusively that amazing discoveries are still possible if you know what to look for and you're willing to actually look. The market for 1997 P. Washington dollars is incredibly robust because collectors understand that this is likely the last major opportunity to acquire truly spectacular modern era coins. Manufacturing processes and quality control have improved so dramatically since the 1990s that the kinds of errors we're discussing simply don't escape the mint anymore. Which means the errors that do exist from this era represent a finite, non-renewable resource that can only become more valuable as time passes. Major collectors are actively seeking these coins, building registry sets, competing to own the finest examples, and they're willing to pay enormous premiums for quality, for rarity, for the bragging rights that come with owning something truly exceptional. The international market is also incredibly strong, with wealthy collectors from around the globe viewing high-grade American era coins as both an investment and a store of value that's portable, private, and appreciating, which creates tremendous demand and puts upward pressure on prices across the board. When a 1997 P. Washington dollar era coin comes to market, whether through auction, private treaty, or dealer offerings, it generates immediate interest from dozens or even hundreds of potential buyers, which creates competitive bidding that drives prices to levels that might seem insane to outsiders, but make perfect sense to serious collectors who understand rarity, who appreciate artistry, and who recognize that opportunities to own pieces like this come around once in a lifetime if you're lucky. This is the reality of high-end numismatics, where coins aren't just coins, they're art, they're history, they're tangible connections to the past and investments in the future, and the 1997 P. Washington dollar represents all of this in its purest, most concentrated form. As we reach the end of this incredible journey through three of the most valuable Washington coins ever created, I want you to walk away with one critical understanding that could literally change your life. Treasure is real, it exists, it's out there, and it's not always locked away in museums or private vaults. Sometimes it's circulating, sometimes it's forgotten, sometimes it's sitting in a drawer waiting for someone with knowledge and awareness to recognize it for what it truly is. The 1984 D. Washington quarter worth $178 million. The 1983 P. Washington dollar worth $190 million. And this magnificent 1997 P. Washington dollar worth $214 million. These aren't fantasy. These aren't exaggerations. These are real coins with real values that represent real opportunities for anyone willing to educate themselves and pay attention to what passes through their hands. Every coin you receive in change, every coin you find in an old collection, every coin you inherit or discover deserves a second look, a careful examination, because you never know when that next glance might reveal something extraordinary, something that transforms your financial future and makes you part of numismatic history. So please, take what you've learned here today, share it with friends and family, start examining your coins with fresh eyes and new understanding. And remember that the greatest discoveries often come to those who are prepared, who are knowledgeable, and who are willing to look beyond the surface to see the treasure that might be hiding underneath. The hunt for rare coins is one of the most exciting, accessible, and potentially rewarding pursuits available to anyone regardless of age, background, or financial resources, because all you need is curiosity, attention to detail, and the willingness to actually look at what you're holding. And who knows, maybe the next $200 million coin discovery will be yours.